When we discuss bus wrecks, injuries involving buses and other commercial vehicles, sometimes that conversation shifts based on the particular facts of a claim to school buses. So not just commercial vehicles, but transportation vehicles for schools or for other public entities. I just recently had an inquiry from someone whose child had been injured on a school bus, and what they were asking is that, is it even possible in Mississippi to hold the school bus operator, the school district, the school, liable for injury on a school bus? And the answer to that question, which by the way is a great question, brings up a number of issues. The answer to that question is yes, but in a normal case, let me rephrase that. There's no such thing as a normal bus wreck case. But in a bus wreck involving a commercial operator, we'll say, those cases are more complex, they're more involved than other personal injury cases just by their nature. A case involving a school bus is actually even more complex than that. And I don't mean that in a bad way in terms of discouraging you that, no, there's no recovery, there's nothing you can do. I don't mean it like that at all. But what I do mean is, in addition to all the other considerations that go into a bus accident claim involving commercial carriers, there's an added level of issues that have to be worked through on a school bus. And most of that arises from a concept that we call sovereign immunity. And what sovereign immunity is, I've commented on it before, it's this ancient doctrine, ancient legal doctrine, really passed down into the American legal system from our ties with England. But it's this ancient doctrine that the sovereign, the crown, the government, cannot be sued or held accountable except for things that the government agrees to be held accountable for. And as sort of contrarian as that may seem to a lot of fundamental American concepts and values, that doctrine has been included in our law. And in Mississippi, like most other states, I think pretty much every state has some form of this to differing degrees. Even the federal government has a form of this in place. But in Mississippi, we do have the doctrine of sovereign immunity embedded in our laws. You can only bring lawsuits against the state of Mississippi or state and local governments. That includes cities, counties, the state government, any entities or subsidiaries under them. So for instance, a public utility that's wholly owned by a city or a county, they're going to have certain protections under sovereign immunity as well. 10, 15 years ago, within the last 10 to 15 years, Mississippi has had a major state Supreme Court ruling come down that helped redefine how we approach sovereign immunity in this state. You often hear terms about managerial discretion, different forms of discretionary immunity or official immunity. All of that comes into play in terms of how our courts interpret whether or not sovereign immunity applies in all cases where a government entity is involved. The question is there some form of exception that's been carved out by the legislature that allows for lawsuits on that issue? And so we're in a period right now in Mississippi where there is a lot of ongoing, continuous evolution of our sovereign immunity laws and which claims may be brought and compensated, which claims cannot be brought and compensated. And some of this is covered and codified in what we call the Mississippi Tort Claims Act, which is the statute that sets forth and allows certain claims to be brought against state and local government here. When we layer in recent Supreme Court rulings onto that, all that comes into play on claims brought against public entities. And so specifically to the point, having laid that foundation on injuries on school buses, the answer that we're really getting at is that in addition to all the complexities that are going to be involved in any other bus crash, injuries arising from a passenger on a school bus in Mississippi are also going to have that added level of complexity and analysis where we have to take in consideration sovereign immunity. In general, yes, absolutely, claims can be brought based on injuries on school buses. The extent of that, though, is going to depend on the causes of the injuries. Was it a crash? Was it a crash involving the school bus driver? Was it a crash involving third party? Was it an injury that had nothing to do with a wreck, but some other form of injury? And so all that's going to come into play. There's tons of legal issues that have to be worked through on that. But the short answer is yes. And the practical advice that really needs to get through to you on that is there is no way to navigate a potential claim arising from an injury on a school bus in Mississippi without legal counsel. And it needs to be legal counsel that does personal injury litigation regularly, legal counsel that has experience in claims against city, state, local governments in Mississippi as well, because all that interplays. And just final thought on that, a big difference in Mississippi between a regular bus crash and a school bus crash, or injury arising on a bus versus injury arising on a school bus, is statute of limitations. A normal, our general statute of limitations is 3 years. That would apply to most bus crashes. Well, if a school bus is involved, understand that goes down to 1 year. Now there is potentially some ways to extend that where minors are involved, which normally there would be minors involved on school buses. But just understand, like, that is a specific example of how a school bus being involved has a huge impact on the law that may be involved in the case, on how the case needs to be worked up, how the case needs to be approached. And it's only through competent counsel with experience, not only in personal injury litigation, but complex commercial vehicle litigation, but also tied in with claims, what we call Tort Claims Act claims, which are claims against government entities. Only by bringing all that together are, one, is your claim going to get handled correctly, and two, are you going to get fair value for that claim? So if you have any questions about injuries on school buses, feel free to reach out to my firm, Brad Morris Law Firm. I'm Brad Morris, and we'll be happy to try to answer your questions, get you the help that you need. Just go through our website or give us a phone call. So thank you for your attention. I hope this has been helpful to you.